What's up, True Crime World? You're here with Luminol on the Wall. I'm Becky.
And I'm Bevy. And today's case is about a nun who devoted her life to her faith and on Halloween night in 1981 was found brutally murdered in her convent. This is the case of Sister Tadea Benz. Listeners' discretion is advised.
Well, hey there to all our LOTW friends and family.
Hey,
Ghouls
guys.
and goblins.
Ghouls and goblins. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Yes. Happy Halloween.
We hope that all the youngins get as much candy as possible and that all the adults do their best to hand out candy and keep the tradition alive.
Yeah.
You know? That's what I like to see. It is one of the best holidays or one of the best couple. It's in that nice holiday season and it's fun and we like it. And we're going to carve pumpkins because we like doing that.
Yes.
It's a tradition of ours and we didn't do it last year because damn pumpkins were out of stock.
That was shocking.
Yeah.
Never happened before.
But we have them ready to go.
Yeah. We've had them for a while.
Yeah, we've had them for a while.
We are not missing out on our tradition.
That's right.
That's right. I'll probably win this year.
Probably not.
All right.
You never win.
That's not true. It's been a while, though. It's been tough. It's been a rough couple years minus last.
Yeah, I feel like I usually am one of the top favorites just because of my artistic abilities. And except for I feel like the last one we did because we missed out on the one last year. I tried to do a Texas Chainsaw Massacre person and I cut the person off and it was the biggest epic fail. You know, I had to keep their feet attached to the pumpkin and I sliced them off. And it was just this, I found a way to attach it with weird toothpicks, but that was the end of it. Just looked like a random thing looking in a dress because yeah, it was just bad.
It was so unfortunate. I was sitting right beside you and I was watching you and then you were and I was jaw dropped as well. I was oh no, she didn't.
Yes,
and
I
was
did.
This could be my year.
Yeah, this could be my year.
And the next day when they all wilted because it was cold out,
Yeah,
it looked even worse.
it did.
Remember the legs were flopped inwards?
Yes,
It had no legs.
no legs. It was just a thing.
Yeah.
Just became a circle that you could put candles in. Realistically,
Yeah.
it was bad.
People walked by and were wow, creative jack-o'-lantern. Loser.
Yeah. Yeah, I gave up pretty quick. I was pretty defeated.
So mad.
I was so mad.
It was great.
Oh, anyways, today, in light of the recent holiday, we are doing a Halloween style podcast.
Yep.
So, shall we get into it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, Becky, Sister Tadea Benz was a 76-year-old Catholic nun who lived a life of quiet devotion. She had spent decades serving in convents across Texas, tending to the needs of the poor and providing spiritual guidance to her community. Born to a devout German Catholic family in the early 1900s, Tadea had been deeply religious from a young age, inspired by the selfless work of missionaries and the simple yet profound teachings of her faith. By the time she reached Amarillo, Texas, she was nearing the twilight of her life. The convent at St. Francis in Amarillo had become her final home. Every morning, she would rise before dawn to pray, the weathered beads of her rosary slipping through her fingers as she whispered ancient prayers. She was known to be kind, quiet, and a pillar of the convent's spiritual community. The people in Amarillo adored her. She was the wise elder who embodied grace, and her slight, frail frame was a testament to the years she had dedicated to a life of poverty, chastity, and obedience. To the sisters who shared the convent with her, she was a symbol of strength and purity, a person who had truly lived the words she preached. But for Sister Tadea, even in the security of the convent, there were some quiet fears she never fully voiced. The convent was located near some troubled neighborhoods in Amarillo, where poverty and crime had started to creep a little bit closer. At night, in her tiny room, she would sometimes hear distant sirens or shouting. She prayed for the souls in those neighborhoods and for the protection of the sisters. She never imagined that such evil would find her in the sanctity of her own convent.
Do you love true crime and travel? Having traveled the world solo the last couple of years and being obsessed with true crime, I found myself researching others who took the same vacations but never made it home. The Last Trip is a true crime podcast covering missing and murdered people that were living their best lives on vacation. I'm your host, Jamie Bevy, and each week I'll bring you on The Last Trip, taking a deep dive into vacation culture and travel spots, tips on staying alive while traveling, and ultimately recreating someone's last days in paradise. What led to their last trip? What are the hard facts? What is the final outcome? And could you be next? David Snedden was a 24-year-old college student from Utah attending Mandarin classes in Beijing when he mysteriously disappeared while hiking Tiger Leaping Gorge. Chinese authorities said he drowned in the gorge, and U.S. authorities agreed, although his body was never found and his parents didn't believe that. 7 years later, out of the blue, they got a phone call from a former U.S. official who had evidence David is still alive. This case sounds like a Hollywood movie, but evidence doesn't lie. So where is David Snedden? Famous rugby player and Celebrity X Factor contestant Levi Davis went missing in Barcelona last year while on a backpacking trip through Europe. Just days before he vanished, he posted a 15-minute video to his Instagram account saying his life was in danger and people were after him. After he disappeared, several theories emerged. But what really happened to Levi Davis? Join me, Jamie Bevy, co-host of the popular true crime series Strictly Stalking, as I embark on a brand new adventure combining true crime and travel. Listen to The Last Trip wherever you get your podcasts.
In the early hours of October 31st, 1981, the peaceful morning routine at St. Francis Convent was shattered. As dawn broke around 6 a.m., the sisters gathered for their usual morning mass. But this time, there was an unsettling absence. Sister Tadea wasn't there. Concern grew quickly, and one of the elder nuns, her heart heavy with worry, climbed the stairs to Sister Tadea's room on the second floor. When she gently pushed open the door, what she saw froze her in her place. Sister Tadea laid motionless on the floor. Her face bore a small trace of blood, but to the sisters it seemed a tragic accident. Perhaps she had fallen, or worse, succumbed to natural causes. Grief-stricken but practical, they swiftly sent her body to the funeral home. Her room was cleaned, her belongings gathered, and the convent fell back into its daily rhythm. It wasn't until about an hour later that a pair of nuns noticed something amiss. Downstairs, on the first floor, a window had been broken. The glass was shattered and the screen had been carefully sliced. Unease began to ripple through the convent, but they still assumed it was just simple vandalism. When the Amarillo police arrived to investigate the situation, they were told there had been no theft, only the somber passing of a beloved sister earlier that morning. But when police heard of Sister Tadea's sudden death in conjunction with the vandalized window, the atmosphere grew tense. Instincts kicked in, and the police officers treated the scene as a potential crime scene, quickly taping off the convent's grounds. The officers requested to see Sister Tadea's body, hoping to rule out any suspicion. But by then, it was too late. She had already been sent off to the funeral home, and the embalming process had begun. The officers rushed to the mortuary, urgency creeping into their steps. They arrived just in time, and they were able to examine Sister Tadea. And as they examined her, horror dawned upon them. There were dark, unmistakable markings around her neck, signs of strangulation. And then came the gruesome discovery: stab wounds concealed beneath her habit. This led them to only one conclusion. It was not natural causes that took Sister Tadea. She had been brutally murdered. Worse still, an autopsy revealed she had suffered unspeakable sexual violence. The trauma was extensive and vicious.
That's wild, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like wild. Like obviously her injuries were pretty extreme, but it is also just wild that she was just taken, like nothing, I don't know, her stab wounds weren't noticed. I don't know, it's just like the nuns were so unsuspecting that they were just like, oh,
our sister.
Natural causes. Let's embalm her.
Yes.
As like a, to lift her up and praise her as the woman of God she was, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, wow, they sure missed a lot.
Yeah, like a pretty darn horrific
Crime.
yeah.
Thank God for police.
Putting
We're
two
a
and
little
two
bit
together.
more weathered, you know, in the sense that they kind of know the violence that occurs in the world and maybe are more tuned to it.
Yeah.
So at least they did get that, information before she was embalmed, and they were able to use it to hopefully, you know, begin to investigate her murder.
Well, and also, like, if they hadn't even put, like, someone died and you have a broken window, maybe they could be connected. Let's look. If they hadn't done that, like, they might have not even known there was a murder on their hands.
Yeah, no doubt, right?
And this
like,
poor nun
just went through this violent, horrific end to her life.
And it's like, let's just go get you cleaned up.
And let's embalm you as you are,
Yes.
stabbed up and all.
Right? Like, thank
Yeah.
goodness the timing on that worked out.
No doubt. Now, after seeing her body, the police are shaken to their core. They now knew they had a vicious predator on their hands, and they hurried back to the convent, hoping to preserve any remaining evidence. They collected Sister Tadea's bedding and clothing from her room, grateful it hadn't been washed by the sisters, who still believed at this point that she had died peacefully. As they combed through her quarters, every detail became significant. Under her bed, they found a bent butter knife, which was a curious and chilling find.
A butter knife.
A butter knife.
A butter
yes.
knife. That's not something you hear every day, Bev.
It's very true.
I mean, I have cut myself with a butter knife before.
Have you?
It's very minor. It did not feel good.
No.
But it can happen.
And with enough force, if you did want to stab someone, I'm not saying this is the murder weapon
Yeah.
at this point, but I'm just saying if you did want to stab someone with a butter knife and you were strong enough, you could, I'm sure you could
Do it.
do it.
I mean, they use shanks in jails. I mean, they sharpen the shit out of those things.
Yeah, so it's a little different, but still. So it's curious nonetheless.
Yeah.
It could be innocent, but it could also be
The murder weapon.
the murder weapon. Now, outside the convent, a discarded steak knife lay hidden. Oh, steak knives are a little bit more hefty, Becky.
A little more dangerous.
Yeah. It's like at this point, we have a butter knife, a steak knife, like...
A broken window.
What are they going to find next, though, you know? Like
a spatula?
Becky, I was thinking in the terms of, like, going from, like, dullest knife to, like, maybe a more sharper one. Becky's like, a utensil.
I mean, a machete would make a lot more sense than a spatula.
Yeah, like, that was where I was going with this, but you're like, a spatula.
I just thought you meant, like, what other...
Like a spoon.
Like,
Maybe they'll find a
nonsensical...
spoon. No.
Nonsensical items could they buy from a kitchen?
I definitely realized that's what you thought I meant after you suggested a spatula, but anyways. They also found strands of black hair nestled among Sister Tadea's sheets that made the hairs on the investigators' necks stand on end. The convent, once a sanctuary of quiet faith, had now become the scene of a monstrous crime, and now every corner, every shadow held secrets waiting to be uncovered. And it didn't take long for the investigation to take a sharp turn.
Hello, my name is Kristen Riguidel, and I'm a licensed insurance broker across Canada and in the United States. But I want to ask you a question. Is life super predictable? No, there's always going to be curveballs in life, but there's two things that I can guarantee you. One, we're all going to have to pay taxes, and two, we're all going to die. I know, it's morbid, right? But it's true. And that's where life insurance comes in. Life insurance is a selfless act. At the end of the day, it's meant for your loved ones in the event you were to pass away unexpectedly. And not that money can ever replace us, but I always liked the idea of leaving some money behind for my brothers, whether that be for their college education, or a down payment on a house, or even just time off of work to grieve. Because the last thing I would want for my family is to have to go to work and pay the bills while they're grieving. And so life insurance gives you the peace of mind that no matter when you pass away, your loved ones are taken care of. With flexible plans, affordable premiums, and coverage that fits your unique needs, I do the shopping around for you so that you can get the protection without the hassle. Because taking care of your future doesn't have to be complicated. If you'd like to discuss options, you can send me an email at krigidel15lrxc@wfgmail.ca or give me a phone call at 403-785-6977. 7670 to learn more and get a free quote today, so you can live tomorrow with peace of mind.
When detectives were contacted by a local clairvoyant named Bubbles.
Bubbles. Hold on. Okay, Bev, before we go any further
Yes.
and find out why Bubbles is relevant, you're a police officer.
Yes.
You get a call from a psychic says, "Hey there, police officer,
I have information for you.
and my name is Bubbles."
Yeah.
Are you going to take said psychic seriously?
I might struggle, but I'd play ball. I'd want to at least know what they were going to say.
See what they're saying?
Yeah.
See if it can make sense or if it's totally like out to left field.
Yeah, definitely I would. What's the word called when you I wouldn't play the game. Like, what is it called? I'd placate them?
Sure.
Whatever. I'm not great with words, so bear with me here. Anyways, Bubbles described a young man running away from the convent who looked similar to Abraham Lincoln. Bubbles and their partner even went out driving around town one night to point out a home in the community that looked like the one in their vision. Now, this home belonged to a 17-year-old named Johnny. Now, Johnny's life was the polar opposite of Sister Tadea. He was born December 24th, 1963, in a poverty-stricken neighborhood of Amarillo. Johnny's early years were shaped by neglect and abuse. And as a child, Johnny became the target of severe physical and sexual abuse at the hands of his stepfather. He was used as an ashtray to put cigarettes out on, and on one occasion was put on top of stovetop burners while it was still on, resulting in severe burns and scarring. His stepfather also pimped him out to other men for sex. Johnny was first introduced to alcohol and other drugs by members of his own family at the age of 10, and subsequently indulged in serious substance abuse involving brain-damaging substances such as paint thinner and amphetamine. From the age of 14, he was forced to perform bizarre sexual acts and participate in pornographic homosexual films with other men. On top of all of that, Beck, as a child, Johnny had learning difficulties and behavioral problems. Teachers noticed his lack of focus, his impulsiveness, and his tendency to act out, but little was done to help him. The cycle of abuse continued at home, and while in school, Johnny became the victim of bullying. He was teased for his shabby clothes and odd behavior, and around grade 7, he had dropped out of school. And in his youth, he was no stranger to law enforcement. Although he had never been involved in anything remotely as brutal as Sister Tadea's death, his name was already on the cops' radar for petty crimes like burglary. He had had a reputation for slipping into homes and businesses around the neighborhood. So with all of this new information about Johnny, the cops decided to arrest 17-year-old Johnny Frank Garrett for the murder of Sister Tadea on November 9th, 1981, just a week after the murder took place. Now, after Johnny Frank Garrett was arrested, he was brought in for questioning by detectives. What unfolded in that interrogation room would become one of the most contentious aspects of this case. According to the detectives, Johnny had confessed to the brutal murder of Sister Tadea. They claimed that, under the influence of LSD and alcohol, he broke into the convent through the first floor window, initially searching for something to steal, specifically a stereo. But instead, they alleged that he found his way into Sister Tadea's room where he raped and killed her. When they laid out this version of events during the interrogation, Johnny seemed detached. He responded with a casual, "Yeah, sure, write it down," rather than offering a direct admission. Despite what the police called a confession, Johnny refused to sign the written statement, and once his mother arrived, he vehemently denied any involvement in the crime. He repeatedly proclaimed his innocence, even as the detectives pressed him for further details.
And this is exactly where the issue is in regards to this confession, I say with air quotes.
Right.
You know, it's not his own words. It's almost as if he's like just fed up.
Yes.
With what they're saying. He's like, I am telling you I'm innocent and I did not do this. And the one thing I think of is you have this young male, hypothetically, breaks into a convent. First of all, it wouldn't be my first choice of looking for a stereo.
Yeah, no doubt.
Just saying. I mean, maybe, but not my first choice. And then when you can't find said stereo, you just go and are like, you know what? Just going to have my way with this nun.
Yeah.
Like, you're telling me.
She's also 76.
It just doesn't seem like the most likely story.
Yeah, no doubt. And to top it all off, we have a clairvoyant named Bubbles who just randomly drove around and pointed out a house. That's how you got your main suspect. And he's saying, I had nothing to do with this, not me. And then you feed him a story and he's like, yeah, sure, whatever, write it down, but then won't sign it. Like, I don't know. You gotta realize, like, that confession isn't, I don't know. It's like, you should look at some other, it's hokey. It is hokey. You should look at some other avenues, right? Like, come on now.
Yeah. Like, keep him on the back burner. And then, you know, if you find other stuff that points to him, sure, maybe try it again.
Like evidence.
Yeah.
Like real life evidence. Like maybe those hairs, do they match him? Like, come on now.
Right? Do they?
So anyways, after his arrest for the murder of Sister Tadea, a psychological evaluation revealed that Johnny suffered from various mental health issues, including brain damage, severe cognitive impairment, and potential schizophrenia. His IQ was reportedly low, falling between 70 and 79, which placed him on the borderline of intellectual disability. There were also claims that he experienced hallucinations and had an altered sense of reality. Despite all of that, the case against Johnny seemed to grow stronger by the day, with Johnny's fingerprints being found at the scene, which is damning. Let's just say that. If that's real, that's damning. The steak knife discarded outside the convent closely resembled those owned by Johnny's mother. Not good evidence. And the fact that Johnny just lived across the street from the convent. An unsettling proximity to the scene of the crime all painted a picture for these cops. So, with this evidence and this so-called confession in hand, his fate appeared sealed. Johnny Frank Garrett was quickly brought to trial for the murder of Sister Tadea Benz, and in the eyes of the prosecution, the case seemed clear-cut. While on trial, the jury was not allowed to hear any details of the torture and abuse that Johnny endured throughout his life. And despite his continued claims of innocence and the concerns with Johnny's mental health, the jury found him guilty. Johnny was sentenced to death at just 17 years old. His initial execution date was set for January 6, 1992. This verdict divided the city. It was a very controversial case at the time because it raised questions about police tactics, as we've mentioned, mental health, and the possibility of wrongful convictions. So there were some people that believed this guy was the guy and some that just had many doubts.
Yeah. A lot of people also found it a little unsettling that they could sentence a 17-year-old to death.
To death, yeah.
At the age of 17, you know right from wrong. I do understand that.
But he's a minor.
He's still a minor. So there was a lot of controversy, like you said.
Right. So just before Johnny's execution in January, the bishop at the convent had made a call to the Pope because he had known Johnny all throughout his childhood. He said Johnny was a good kid with just a troubled past. The bishop knew that Johnny needed to stay busy to keep out of trouble, and the bishop would regularly give Johnny odd jobs in and around the convent, such as moving furniture around, setting things up for the sisters, so it wouldn't be out of the question that his fingerprints could be all over the convent. That is very interesting because when that evidence was obviously said, I was like, that would be damning, right?
Yeah,
why else would he have reason to be there?
But now we know he had a lot of good reasons to be there.
Yeah.
And one thing that's interesting, Bev, is this bishop was not allowed in the trial.
Whoa. So he came out with this even before the trial took place.
Yeah, it was like a known thing because Johnny lived there his whole life or most of it.
Yeah.
And the bishop saw that in him and offered him lots of little odd-end jobs.
Wow.
As a younger child into his youth. It wasn't just a one-time thing.
That's a shame because that could put reasonable doubt on why his fingerprints were there. And all the other evidence was pretty circumstantial, right? Fingerprints are the one thing that was good.
They're more absolute, right?
More absolute. Yeah. So, that seems like a failing on the court's part. Hey?
100%.
Now, after the Pope, John Paul II, and the bishop spoke, he then called and requested that Governor Ann Richards grant Garrett a 30-day reprieve for his case to be looked over and possibly have the death sentence taken off the table. The reprieve was granted and his execution was postponed for 30 days. This was the first time since Texas resumed executions in 1982 that a governor had intervened in an execution. However, during that 30 days of reprieve, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles voted against Johnny's commutation, and Johnny's execution date was then reset for February 11th of 1992. What's really sad in all of this is that right up until his execution, Johnny was continuously claiming his innocence. And even in his final words, he kind of sticks it to the man after he eats his last meal, which was a bowl of ice cream, in saying, "I'd like to thank my family for loving me and taking care of me. The rest of the world can kiss my ass."
Yeah, he's like, the rest of you don't know shit. The rest of you think I'm guilty.
I didn't do this.
Yeah.
I'll eat my bowl of ice cream and I'm going to get executed, but fuck you all.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, Johnny Frank Garrett's case took an eerie turn after his execution, thanks to a letter he left behind in his prison cell. In it, he cursed society and everyone he believed was responsible for his conviction and impending lethal injection. The letter stated that those involved in his death would, quote-unquote, pay. This ominous note gave rise to what would become known as the Johnny Frank Garrett curse, as a series of strange and tragic events befell many who had been connected to his trial and execution.
Oh, yeah. This is, like, not that I want anyone to die, but I love a good twist, like a curse. And, you know, do you believe in curses? Do you not? That's the big question. However, when you go to this next part, Bev, it is damning. It is shocking. Like, you think, okay, one or two people, sure. But then, well, okay.
It's like almost down near everyone.
Yeah.
So you're like, was this curse real?
Yeah. You're like,
or was
what
it
a
just
problem.
karma?
Was it a guilty conscience?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Well, I guess we will all find out together. So one of the most well-known examples of this curse was the fate of the medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Sister Tadea. This examiner was later convicted of tampering with evidence and falsifying documents in approximately 100 cases, casting doubt on his role in Garrett's case as well. And while serving his prison sentence, his wife died of pancreatic cancer, adding a chilling layer to his downfall. Another example would be about Johnny's defense attorney, who at the time of the trial was widely criticized for his poor handling of the case. He also succumbed to pancreatic cancer. Many believed that he hadn't done enough to advocate for Johnny during the trial, and his death further fueled the rumors of this curse.
Yeah.
Now, what was even more unsettling was the death of Kathy Jones, a news reporter for the NBC who had relentlessly pursued Johnny's mother after the guilty verdict, going so far as to confront her in a courthouse washroom. And not long after the trial, Jones died in a plane crash, leaving many to wonder if she had fallen victim to Johnny's posthumous curse.
I mean, the tally's up to 3.
Right? And the pattern of misfortune didn't just stop there, Becky. The judge who presided over the case, along with a lawyer and 2 police officers involved in the case, all developed forms of leukemia and passed away. As well, a juror who had helped seal Johnny's fate died after a freak accident falling down a flight of stairs. And another juror's daughter died in a rare one-of-a-kind accident. And that juror's sister also passed away unexpectedly.
Was that 9? I think it is.
Wow, that's a lot, hey?
Yeah.
And the string of deaths extended beyond the courtroom and law enforcement. A fellow inmate of Johnny's, who falsely claimed that Johnny had confessed to the murder in order to gain favor, later took his own life. Similarly, a school teacher who testified against Johnny also died by suicide. Perhaps most haunting of all was the fate of the district attorney who prosecuted Johnny's case. After the trial, he spiraled into a life of addiction, turning to drugs and alcohol to cope with the burden of the case. In the end, he too took his own life, adding yet another name to the list of people who had suffered tragic ends after being involved in Garrett's trial. The strange and tragic pattern surrounding Johnny Frank Garrett's case has kept his story alive long after his death, leaving many to wonder if the so-called curse was real or simply a string of coincidences. Whether believed or not, the curse has cemented Garrett's case in true crime lore, adding an unsettling twist to an already controversial execution.
Like, what?
What? I mean, if we kind of rationalize this a little bit, I mean, like, listen, cancer, it knows no bounds.
It knows no bounds.
So, I mean, there's like a decent chance that many people will be affected in this lifetime. God forbid, truly.
Yeah.
It's a terrible, terrible disease. But, I mean, those ones, I mean, could just be, you know, bad luck.
Yeah. Luck of the draw.
But I don't know. Sometimes when you, like, know you've made a mistake and you know someone lost their life over it, I mean, that could probably eat away at your soul, right? And maybe inflict disease upon you, or guilt or shame leading to poor choices or what have you.
For
so
sure.
who knows? Maybe it's the curse. Maybe it's karma, but
Maybe it's just pure coincidence.
unsettling.
But that is a lot of
nonetheless.
people
That's a
for it
lot of
just to
people.
be coincidence. Like, I don't know if I believe in curses, to be quite frank, but this makes me think that maybe there are, Bev.
Oh.
I don't really know what I believe, to be quite honest, but it's just like, what?
Yeah, that is very
so
uncanny.
many people.
Very uncanny.
And like, you notice like it's multiples of things except the plane crash.
Yeah, like multiple suicides.
Multiple pancreatic,
Mm,
leukemias,
yeah,
weird accidents like stairs, planes, and one that wasn't noted,
right.
and then suicide.
Yeah, so it's a bunch of like groupings of the same type of passing, right?
I don't know, Bev.
Who knows? We'll leave it up to you guys to speculate, but it is eerie.
It is.
Now, following his execution, there were still some issues that raised the question, was the wrong man executed? There had been semen found in the vaginal canal of Sister Tadea that was never tested. The hair found in the sheets were black and curly, which did not match Sister Tadea or Johnny's hair, nor was it even tested. And in 2004, Amarillo attorney Jesse Quakenbush filed petitions to have evidence tested, believing that the only thing Johnny was guilty of was having a low IQ and mental illness. Quakenbush believes that the man who actually killed Sister Tadea is named Leoncio Perez Rueda, who was found guilty of a shockingly similar crime that took place a couple months after Sister Tadea was killed. A single 77-year-old woman by the name of Narnie Box Bryson, who lived in the same area of town, was sexually assaulted and strangled to death. When Narnie was killed, the detective working her case thought maybe the same man had killed Sister Tadea too. Months later, a man named Leoncio Perez Rueda was arrested after being caught peeping in windows, and eventually he confessed and pleaded guilty to murdering Narnie Bryson, and for this crime, he was sentenced to 45 years in prison. What's interesting is Leoncio was initially a person of interest in Sister Tadea's case, but when the police set their sights on Johnny because of Bubbles, he was ruled out.
Yeah.
Ruled out why? Just because they
I think
thought
it was more like
Johnny
he was
more
forgotten about, and
Mm.
I think they had such tunnel vision
right.
with Johnny that
They just kind of were like,
Leoncio who?
Leoncio who?
Yeah.
So attorney Quakenbush is dedicated to prove Johnny Garrett's innocence and is going through the proper but painstaking process in the courts to have the semen and hair in Sister Tadea's case tested for DNA. He believes that Leoncio is responsible for Sister Tadea's death, which honestly, Becky, it seems kind of likely, yeah? Like,
Oh yeah.
think of the MO. Both women, like elderly women, right?
Yeah.
Strangled and raped
Yeah.
in the same area? Like,
It sounds like one person would have done it.
what would have done both?
Yeah, like what are the chances that there's two completely different men from like different backgrounds, different age ranges that commit almost an identical crime?
Yeah.
There's no fucking chance.
Yeah, within months of each other too,
Mhm.
right? So I can't wait to get that outcome
Yes.
because that will be interesting. So anyways, at the end of the day, Johnny's family still supports his innocence 40 years later and believe that despite his mental health struggles and his horrible childhood trauma, that one day they will be able to clear his name and prove that he did not kill Sister Tadea. And as of 2017, there hasn't been much progress in this case, but Jesse Quakenbush, the attorney, made a documentary about it, which eventually inspired the horror film called Johnny Frank Garrett's Last Word. So TBD, guys. TBD.
TBD. I'm starting to feel like we may never know.
But
One can hope.
one can hope.
Whether he did it or not.
Right,
We
of
wanna
course. We
know.
want to know the answer. Now, as for Sister Tadea, her memory lives on in the hearts of those she touched with her kindness and faith. She became an unintentional martyr, a symbol of innocence, lost in the face of inexplicable violence. So, Becky, that's the case for today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing.
reminder to download our weekly episodes, follow us on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, and give us a follow on our social medias. You can find us at Luminol on the Wall. Can't wait till next week.